Who the hell is Alfred Medley?
Are you ready? To all you strange people out there, we have a question that we're trying to really figure out. We need to know who the hell's Alfred Medley.
It was known about for years in New Orleans that it was part of a collection, but that's all anyone seemed to know. It was an Alfred Medley collection that this guy had stamped a bunch of books with his name on it, but no one knew who Alfred Medley was.
Talked to Carl a couple times, and he was just like, "Oh, I was just this collector," and he stamped all his books. And they would sell parts of the collection at different times, and that's why you only see him in New Orleans, because he was from New Orleans. It was all his first appearances, but the stamp was always everywhere in the same spot. And I always thought he would pick the spot that actually had the least amount of characters in the most open area.
I mean, I've heard some of the stories about him through other people. I found the stamp on the book, and I remember asking Carl about it, and I was like, he's like, people have asked me about that. He's like, I don't think I've ever met the guy, but I think he puts his stamp on it because he's like trying to market that it's his, and he's like kids do.
Because it was a kid that was doing this in the 60s, because they were all bought, looked like right off the stands. It wasn't like an adult later on going on, I'm stamping all my books. When I went and worked for AG, he got a collection, and it had 3 or 4 issues that were stamped. I was like, oh, look, another Alfred Medley book. He's like, Alfred was a trip. I'm like, oh, so you knew him? He goes, nobody really knew him. He said, but he would always just show up, and he would have key books, and he was a good negotiator. And he's like, but he kind of just, after the collection went away, he went away. There's also a brother.
Yeah, there's a brother too.
The brother would go with the father, because everything I ever got out of whenever they would do, it was like strict negotiations. They knew the worth, they knew the value. They were shrewd. They were going to get their money's worth of whatever they were doing trying to sell it. So the dad was pretty smart if that was the dad that was doing it.
I remember the stamp. I remember seeing that stamp, and I've seen it on several books between there and like BSI. Some guy that did this to all of his comic books. I thought maybe it was a library stamp or something.
I've always wondered if Alfred Medley was a real person. Most of the stamps that I ever saw were for stores.
It is a store stamp, and it's from right up around, I'd say, between Nashville and Virginia. The Alfred Medley, when the story went for us, there was an old department store, and when we'd come across them, they'd make us think like they were holy grail.
Yeah.
And the only problem was it was no more than a gimmick. And that later on, why he would stamp them thinking he'd get away with it was because remember all the stores would take their stamp the comics, which does not hurt the back. There was a store that was called Alfred Medley's, which was a variety store, sort of your mom and pop traded shop. Like you'd take a dozen eggs, take home flour. And he would stamp it on there, and the kids, this is actually the way the story was told to me, he had it stamped on there, so when the kids took the books home and read them, if they wanted to come back, if they had it stamped, they could trade them back in.
That sounds like somebody vultured, like scavenged a pedigree collection. I don't know what would have caused that. But I really want to know how and why Alfred Medley's collection made it out into the world. Because you asked me if I knew who Alfred Medley was, and I said, coincidentally, I do actually know who Alfred Medley was. I've always kind of had a little bit of a, thing in the back of my head of who the hell is this guy, because I had 2 comics that I thought was a store.
I don't remember Alfred personally. I thought maybe that's who it was, but I didn't know. I was probably all of 12, 13 years old, was in the store when Kirby and Carl were buying a few books. We're talking key issues, Marvel, for the most part that I remember. The argument ensued of whether or not the stamped name affected the condition of the book.
Something is stamped on it, it's ruined.
It's like, wouldn't this devalue the book? And Carl's like, it's in the dollar rack. It's not that valuable to begin with.
How much did you sell it for?
It sold for $900. Actually, I didn't want to sell it, and I said $900 when it was really worth about $7, and dude just bought it anyway. So maybe it was because of the stamp. So all you people out there, buy it because of the Medley stamp. There you go. Buy it for that.
The best deal I think I ever got was I bought Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 from Carl Tupper at cover price. and I sold that son of a bitch for $1,500.
Carl was probably the goofiest looking, most ornery, cantankerous guy you would probably ever see in your life. And you fell in love with him immediately because he was so affable and he was so personable. And he was just the sweetest guy most of the time. From what I understand, Carl had a stroke real early, 36 or... He was in his early 30s, I think, when he had the stroke, wasn't he? But he had the stroke, and it was kind of like a therapy thing. He opened the store.
BSI stands for Book Swap Incorporated. Had nothing to do with comics. He had Harlequin paper book romance novels, and he had tons and tons of them. And middle-aged women would come in and buy books at like 50 cents a book. Well, one of the people I worked for after Carl, A.G. Parr, he and Kirby G, another major person in the comic scene during my time, Richard Ory, they all kind of said, hey, Carl, bring some comics in because you got mothers in here, kids, something kids could do. And you're talking about early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So it wasn't really, he was like, okay, bring it in, whatever, I don't care. And that ended up becoming his business just by letting 3 people say, hey, this is a good idea. And it changed completely. So Book Swap Incorporated became BSI Comics, and all the paperbacks went away.
BSI actually stands for Book Swap Incorporated. It was a paperback bookstore. It was something that his mother-in-law came up with to get him out of the house because he was driving his wife crazy, sitting around the house. This is his story to me.
Carl was an endearing soul. I never met anybody that disliked him. I met people that were taken back. They didn't know what to think of him in some ways. I think he was an enigma to some people. And in some ways, I think that they were afraid to get to know him. I mean, he did have some facial issues, and he was in a wheelchair, and I think some people pitied him. But I think if anybody would have actually spent any time with that man, they would have realized that he lived a life that most people would have dreamed of. He had kids that he did adore, a wife that I knew very much that he loved, and he lived a good life. I mean, he did what he enjoyed. I think things would have been different if he hadn't had the surgery and accident or whatever. But all in all, I think he lived an incredible life. And I think he touched more people than he ever really realized. My best Carl stories that I'll give you is, and it's going to show the love that he had for Linda. I got a phone call, and it was Linda, and she sounded upset, and I handed the phone to Carl. And then you get in that one-sided conversation, What? What's going on? Who? Whatever. All right, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Hangs up the phone. He's like, I need you to drive me over to the house. You got to realize the house is maybe all of 10, 15 blocks. It's real close. So we close up. We go over to the house. He's like, I'll be back in a few minutes. Just stay in the car. Keep it running. Whatever. You just do what you're told, He goes to the house. Well, that takes him a few minutes to get in the house. He's in the wheelchair, mind you. So he's got to get out, put the chair down, get in the chair, roll in the house. I see him come outside the house. He's got a shotgun laid out across his lap. Now he rolls across the street and goes and knocks on the door. Next thing I know, that gun's pointed in some dude's face. Didn't get to hear the conversation, but I got the gist of it. Rolls back across the street, goes in the house, puts the gun away, gets back in the car and rolls off. We ride back to the store now, all of 12 or 15 blocks. Doesn't utter a word. Finally, I'm like, all right, Carl, I'll bite. What's going on? He's like, Linda apparently was backing out the driveway that day and almost backed into this guy's car. Well, he evidently had a few derogatory words to say to Linda, and that didn't go over very well. And like Carl told me, he's like, I got papers that says I'm crazy. I told that guy, I'll shoot you dead in your face. I'll do about 30 days in some insane asylum somewhere, eat my pills, eat my Jell-O, and then I'll go back to my wife, who you talk dirty to. Don't ever do it again. It's just the kind of guy he was. Whether the gun was loaded, I don't know. I bet that thing didn't even have a firing pin, and he probably hadn't shot it since he was fought in Korea. But that wasn't the point. The point was that somebody messed with his wife. And people think because he was in that wheelchair that he couldn't handle himself. Well, that old man could handle himself any day, any time. Kirby G and John Fontaine, which is another complete derelict, were sitting around talking about collections, and the name Alfred Medley came up somehow. And at the time, they were doing a show called Pelican, and they were trying to get all these great comic artists to come together and all this. And they thought it would be a great idea to try to find the guy who had this New Orleans folklore collection, Alfred Medley. So he gets out the phone book and proceeds to call all the Medleys in the phone book and actually gets in touch with somebody that knows Alfred Medley. And it turned out to be the brother, I believe. And he asked him about the collection, and he told him, they asked him about the fact that the books were stamped with his name on it. And the brother supposedly responded, well, he was a particular asshole, and hung up.
They said that after Senior died.
Yeah.
They said that they called one more time to see if there was any more books available, and they were like, no, everything's done. We got rid of it all, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I always assumed that was Alfred who died.
Dear Harry, thanks for asking about my father. Unfortunately, he died from cancer in 1983. These comic books you speak of were actually mine. I found out from my mother that in the early 80s, long after I had grown up, moved out of the city to get a job, that for some reason she was on a radio station being interviewed about one of our church events. And during the course of the interview, she mentioned that she had all of these old comic books lying around the house, that her son had left, and she thought they might be collector's items, because I told her that. Lo and behold, she said some guy called her about the comic books. So he came over to the house, browsed through the collection, and bought a few. Okay. I don't know which ones he bought, but I know he must have cherry-picked, All right? But he only bought a few, okay?
And so I kind of
He said they kept calling him, about it. He didn't know what to do, so he called me, and I was living in Birmingham at the time. He said, they keep bugging me about it. He said, what do you want me to do? Because your mama want to get rid of them.
Right.
So, you think about it, and basically what you say to yourself, okay, if I don't do something to get a few dollars out of it, then if she throws them away, I get zero, right?
Right.
They didn't mind, they knew I did it. My father, one of the reasons they were so preserved, as some people say, is he was a craftsman. He made these boxes for me to put them in, but as the collection got larger, he made more boxes. So they were like big boxes, but he only made them so high. So I'd put the comic books in a stack, try to stack them vertically, and half of them would be hanging out, so the ones in the front would kind of tilt over and bend, I thanked him for making them. It was a good thing, but I don't think he understood that I needed something about twice as high to preserve them, but, what you gonna do? Right. He just made them just because, Like I said, I knew they were collector's items when I bought them, but I didn't know how long it would take. And then when it got to that point, I was grown and working and had responsibilities and everything. I really didn't read comic books anymore, so when they wanted to get rid of them, I guess I just acquiesced. Well, throw my hands up and say, well, hey, what can I do?
It's probably Sheldon. It's probably Sheldon.
That would be hilarious.
Because that would make sense of Sheldon calling a radio talk show.
Some guy who defaces comic books. That's definitely Sheldon's sort of modus operandi. Oh, here's a big collection. Okay, I want to buy 5 or 10. Okay, I'm going to come back a couple of days later and buy 5 or 10. Oh, okay, you're going to give me a price, fine, I'll buy it all. I'm a 14-year-old kid, 1981, freshman at De La Salle, and sitting around in the cafeteria one day, and a buddy of mine's got the P. Craig Russell Elric comic books, and another buddy of mine had just handed me the first novel like the week before. Like, dude, this is gorgeous. What is this? Where are you getting it? Like, I got it from the comic shop. Where the hell is the comic shop? So after school, we truck on down to Magazine, to Sheldon's. Start making the trip there every week. Got to go grab something else. And after a couple of months, hanging out there a good bit after school, he's like, hey, I need an extra pair of hands. I want to do a little bit of work for some comic book credit. So I started doing that. You know, within the year, I'm running the show. Report cards come out. Dude, I got a 4.0. Here, $100 worth of credit. Bam. You know, like I'd be working, it's getting near exam times. It's like, your exams are coming up, right? It's like, yeah. It's like, all right, you're taking the next 2 weeks off. You got to get your ass home and study. You know, which is amazingly sensible for Sheldon.
I started reading comics somewhere around 6th or 7th grade, which means I was about 12 years old. And I used to just get comics from the stores before, you know, just from like Time Saver and stuff like that. But there was a cartoon that was on in the mornings called Robotech. And then a friend of mine told me that they made a Robotech comic book, but you could only get it from specialty stores. So that's how I found Magazine Street Bookshop, otherwise known as Comic Book Heaven, and went over there. And my mom brought me, and they had the Robotech comic books. But he's like, you know, and I got those, and at first I was going to get those, and it was like ready to go. And he's like, well, you know, we got a lot of other stuff here. Why don't, you know, you might want to stick around. I was like, yeah, that would be awesome. So then Sheldon actually told my mom, he's safe here. You know, you can, if you got some other stuff to do, you can just leave him, come back. I like to let the kids look through the books and everything else. So I did. I stayed there for about 3 or 4 hours. Most of the rest of the day, I was in the comic book shop.
Sheldon would always try to find a way to get us over there because he knew how much we loved comic books. And even during Mardi Gras time, there were parades passing on there, and Sheldon always kept saying, why don't you just come on this back road here? And Mom and Dad didn't want to do that at all. It was too much of a hassle.
Well, I mean, of course, I was like 11, so it's seeing through the eyes of that, he seemed like, I remember the sideburns, and sort of like the Penguin, you know, from Batman. A little bit like Grandpa Munster, a little bit, you know.
You know, and it's funny because he's this little bald gnome. You know, I mean, he from a Dungeons and Dragons standpoint, he was like a gnome that was about 6 inches too tall. You know, I mean, the blonde hair, the sort of Larry from the Three Stooges fringe here. You know, and what was crazy was, you know, you see the shop and how just jammed. You know, like New Orleans and New York stores tend to be just everything's jammed up to the roof. You know, I come into work one day, and we had like these rows of books and comics, and then you remember the shop, rows of shelves going back, and then on the right-hand side, the bottom half is all the 3 for $1 comics and stuff. And I come in one day, and there's this huge box sitting on the desk, and I walk over, and I look at the top of it, and the groan I let out must have been audible, because I hear Sheldon from behind the stack saying, what's wrong? Because I look into this box, and there's 2,000 copies of Dazzler #1. And I'm just like, dude, seriously? I hope these were free, and even if they were, it's not worth the space. It's like, no, this is a great deal. I got them for $0.01 a piece. It's like, dude, you're going to have to pay someone a nickel to take these away. This is not a good deal. Oh, yeah, but I got them $0.01. Fucking every couple of months, look over, and there's this huge stack of Dazzler ones filling the back end of the shelf, and I just go, hey, Sheldon, remember those? It's like, yeah, they're going to move eventually. They were only $0.01 a piece. I stand by my decision. This was still a good deal. That was an interesting era. There was me, a guy named Charlie Schluter, who's now the Grand Marshal of a local Mardi Gras organization. Mike Katz, I've got no idea whatever happened to him. Skinny Jewish guy with a really acerbic sense of humor, so he and I got along great. And Richard Ory, who's the guy that turned me on to American Flag, and then a couple of years later left, and the next time I run across him, his name is the byline doing the inks on American Flag down the line, you know, so Richard actually made good and got into the industry, you know, whereas the rest of us just talked about it. Now, by the time you get to like 82 or 83, you know, I'm a junior in high school at this point, you know, running the shop by myself half the time when Mike and Richard aren't around. I'd be sitting here trying to work, and Sheldon would walk across the street to the pet shop and just hang out all afternoon. I was like, dude, why I need you to fucking sign this check or whatever else may come up. And he'd come back and he's like, just go, every time he'd come back across the street, it's all about the birds over there, the birds over there. I'm like, dude, Sheldon, I'm a cat person. Birds are hors d'oeuvres. I really don't care. The only way I care about birds is if they got bacon across their back and they're cooked properly. All right? Really could not care. It's a species I am not fond of. I have no love of hearing about this. And I'm trying to work. I'm trying to get this stuff out on the shelf so we can keep the rent paid. So this is every day for like a year straight. And one day he comes back across the street and he's got all this hardware shit from Harry's Hardware down the street. And he's like, here, gets this eye hook thing. He's like, here, I want you to put this in the ceiling right there. And he points to the spot. Like, he had his desk at an angle. He had the front window right behind it. And there was a chair right here, like a sort of an easy chair thing. And then he had the door entering the shop. And the chair, that's where I'd sit and price comics and everything else. And he points to the spot like right above my chair. Kind of give him the stink eye. It's like, okay, I don't like this, whatever it is. I get up on the ladder, I put the damn hook in, hang the chain from it like I want, and he leaves. I'm just sitting there, it's like, what the hell is this moron doing now? And half an hour later, he comes back with a cage with that fucking cockatiel in it. Hangs it right over my goddamn chair. Thanks, boss. You know, so I'm Creole. I'm into the okay, I'm gonna get you thing, and so it just kind of snowballs from there. The bird is the big point of contention. And he come in, it's like, no, I'm sitting at your desk. He's like, I'm the owner. You got to move. It's like, yeah, you go sit under the bird, dude. And he would sit here like this, slumped over in his chair. He had this sort of pot belly like this. And he would line up these sunflower seeds like in the crease of the pot belly right here and let the bird walk around on him and get the sunflower seeds. And he put the sunflower seeds in his teeth and the damn bird would come and eat them and everything. It's like, oh, the bird is the be-all and end-all. Like, bacon, Sheldon, bacon across its back. The minute your back is turned, I don't care if it's only a mouthful, that damn thing's going to be an hors d'oeuvre.
Like, that was part of a rite of passage, like, of going to his shop. You had to become friends with the bird, which was okay. I mean, he's a nice bird. He didn't take a crap on me, so I was fine with that.
The parrot was hilarious. I met that parrot. Oh, my God, the parrot's funny. The parrot was always on his shoulder all the time, flying around the store constantly.
The bird was annoying as hell. He used to shit all over the place.
I lined the cage with Dazzler issues. I was making a statement. But yeah, he would, their newspapers around and just grab shit out of the 3 for $1 shelf and tear it up and lay it down on the bottom. Like, yeah, it's a quarter, whatever. I think by the time I'd left, I'd whittled the stack down about that much thanks to the bird cage. So up to this point, it's been the Magazine Street comic book shop. So Sheldon decides he's going to have a competition. Name the bird, and whichever name he ends up picking, that person's going to get like $100 in free credit or something like that. So he has this competition. And he picks the name Cat Food, which was my girlfriend at the time's suggestion. I don't know whether it's just because cat food's the perfect name for a bird or just because he knew it had turned my crank to pick Monica's name. So that's where he changed the sign to Cat Food's Comic Book Emporium, and I think this is early '85, right before I went off to college. So the bird, yeah, I got a personal vendetta. If that bird was still alive, I would hunt it down and cook that damn thing. I swear to God. Yes, that was his thing. No, it's a penguin. And it's his sense of humor, but he just took it so far. You're dead right. So somebody obstinate like say me. It's like that's not a penguin. That's an hors d'oeuvre. That's not a penguin. That's a cockatiel. And you'd gainsay him about 3 times on that, and then you'd see it here like the little red rash, like Gorbachev in the '80s, and just go. It's like if there were gamma radiation involved, he would have hulked out.
I remember specifically though, you and Sheldon going back and forth. You were one of the people giving the hardest time about the bird, being a penguin, and you'd be like, no, it's a parakeet or something like that. He's like, no, it's a penguin. You're like, no, it's a parakeet. And he would never let up. He was relentless with like, if you kept saying it was a bird, he was going to keep saying it was a penguin or whatever. And then, of course, I remember the famous story where he bought up all those copies of some comic book that had a penguin in it because of Cat Food, the penguin. He bought, like, all these copies. It was like a sucky comic that, like, no one wanted to read.
I don't know if it was an argument over a penguin, But I was actually around that day. I had just gotten off the streetcar and walked down to Magazine Street coming from high school, and run up to Popeyes, grab something to eat, and I'm walking down Magazine Street, and I see this dude running, and behind him is Sheldon, and it's just fistfuls of bird seed, like confetti. It's like, and stay out, never darken my door again. And I'm just like, hey, boss, and just keep walking.
He honestly was not very friendly to me. I mean, when I was there, I remember once I had taken out a heavy metal magazine from the baggie and was looking at it, and I was looking at some other stuff. And he walked by without saying anything. He just picked it up, put it back in the sleeve, and put it back in the shelf. Like, basically, it was just like, get out of here, kid. You know, touching that. So.
It was always entertaining, you know, because we were right across from the police station. You know, that was the point where I learned that a lot of cops are geeks. You'd hit the shift change, and all of a sudden there's this blue line of guys coming in the door. Need my folder. Oh, dude, you mean Teen Titans isn't out yet? Yeah, this is the era when George Perez was rocking the Titans and Nightwing's first costume hits and everything. You know, so it was really weird to me that I actually, you know, I'm a 16-year-old kid. You know, I'm hanging out in the punk scene. You know, I'm probably not the most legal person in the world. And all of a sudden, I'm friends with all these cops because we sit around bullshitting about the Avengers and Iron Man and the John Byrne Fantastic Four and such. He wouldn't get mad a lot, but if you found that one chink in the... And Mike Katz was great at this. You'd find the one little thing that would aggravate Sheldon, just kind of walk in and drop a comment, walk off. I remember it vividly. I don't know what started it, but I come into work one day, and Sheldon's kind of being pissy, and Mike Katz sort of stomping around in the shop, and I'm in the back, you know, kind of organizing things after everybody's picked through, because the day before was all the new issues coming in. And I hear raised voices up in the front of the shop, you know, so being a nosy Creole, I wander up the aisle and walk up, and right as I'm getting up to the desk, I see Mike standing there, and he just slams down this folder full of comics on the desk. He's like, Sheldon, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Go fuck yourself. The top of his lungs, you know, it was like those old speaker commercials. You can almost see Sheldon's hair blowing back in the wind. And slam, go fuck yourself. And stomp, stomp, stomp out the door down the street and never saw him again. As far as I know, really didn't go any place other than home, 3 blocks up to the comic shop, across the street to the pet shop, and over to the Popeyes right there. You know, which was, I don't think I ever saw him eat anything but Popeyes and the occasional guy's po' boy, you know, in 4 years of working there.
So not too long after that, she had a stroke, okay, and was hospitalized. So my dad, he was the only one still living at the house at the time, but we found out he had cancer. And I was talking to him on the phone one day, and he mentioned that same guy, he said, you know, that same guy who came over and bought a few comics books from your mom called, and he wanted to buy a few more. Well, at the time, I was trying to go to California. I said, give me his phone number. I'll talk to him, okay, because I want to find out. So I got to thinking, because I knew they wanted to get rid of him. I said, I'm going to California. I need some money. I wonder if I could get him to buy the whole collection. That's what I said to myself. So I had the number. I called him up. I was in Birmingham. Never met him, just called him up. And he said he wanted to buy a few of the comic books. Would I be willing to sell them, and how much did I want for them? So I said, listen, I want to sell you all of them, because I figured it was accomplish 2 things, 2 birds with 1 stone, as they say. I get rid of the comic books before my parents threw them out, and maybe get a little money. So he says, well, how much do you want for them? I said, I want $350. And he said, oh, well, that's kind of plenty. I said, listen, I know you've been in that collection. You know what I have. You know I got collector's items in that. So between that and all the other peripheral comic books I had, I know they're worth a lot of money. I said, that's what I want, $350. I know he was trying to persuade me in the negotiation, but you know, I'm from New Orleans, I know all the tricks, okay? I said, I want $350. He said, okay. So I said, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna call my father back and tell him to give you the comic books, but you need to give him $350 in cash, okay? So he said, okay, all right, I'll see what I can do. So I called my father back, and I said to him, I said, listen, Daddy, I told him I'd sell them to him for $350, okay? I said, you collect the $350 from him, and he can have them all, all right? I said, okay. I said, oh yeah, furthermore, the ticket to California only cost me about $300. So you keep the $50 for the agent fee, you know. I mean, 'cause since you're doing all of this, so, you know, he was happy because he probably never sold nothing in his life, you know. My mama was the shrewd one, just like my sister.
You know.
The rumors.
Right.
Well, in reality, my father was probably the only person that whoever bought them met, because I was in another state at the time, you know, but I talked to him one time on the phone, gave him my price, told my father what to do, and I guess that's how it evolved.
There's a science fiction convention. Sheldon, okay, you know, go to the con. Yeah, here, I'll pay your way in. Go to the con. But I'm not wasting money on buying a table or anything. So here's a shitload of business cards. In the middle of the night, just go shove them under the doors of all the rooms and everything. I go to the con, it's like, dude, I'm not doing that. That's stupid. You know, and I'm talking to my friend Staborski, who worked over for Carl at BSI at the time. You know, and he made, you know, like, I'm sitting there, it's like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Yeah, I got this stack of business cards, and Sheldon's got this stupid idea and everything. And he must have mentioned it to Carl, because I'm walking through the dealer's room later, and here comes Uncle Carl in his wheelchair. Hey, man, that dipshit tell you to do, like, street team shit, shoving that under the doors and everything? Yeah, he's like, yeah, that's Sheldon. He's just a shithead.
Working at a shop, it was 89 when I got employed from Carl Tupper at BSI on the Fairfield location. It was a whole different world. Comics were cheap, and I worked for a cheaper man. So he believed that if he gave us a Coke and $1 an hour, that was enough for the slave labor that we did. But again, we were opening up to a whole new world of, you know, excitement. It was at your hands, and I mean, the man had probably about at least 100,000 comics in that building at all times. So it was an education in retail, customer service, and how to run and how to not run a business. When you're dealing with a man who had a larger-than-life persona, and he ran a business that way. Carl was probably one of the greatest men I've ever known. Huge father figure to me. I mean, my dad's a good father. So I didn't need that surrogate father. He just fell into that role because I spent all this time with the man. He was very complicated. The man was a genius. If he wouldn't have had the tumor in his brain, we wouldn't have BSI. And he was tall in stature. I mean, when he sat in a wheelchair, everybody saw him. He was this little decrepit man. But when he stood up, the man was like 6'3", 6'4". I mean, and he was imposing. I mean, when he was a good basketball player when he was young. So, and his claim to fame when he was a tax man. So it's amazing that a tax man who fell into a hobby to keep him busy, which was a bookstore, and the man had the best swear words, best lines. Probably the one that always sticks to my mind is he used to say, "You could suck the snotty end of my fuck stick, babe," when somebody would just piss him the hell off and he wanted them out of the building. You know, he had his own little quirks. For fun, in the back room of BSI, it was a good, probably about 10 by 20 room. And there was one door in, and there was a door that went outside, that went to the trash. So that was always locked or padlocked. Well, you could lock the door from inside the store, not outside of the door. So he would lock people in a room. Well, one day he thought it was a joke. He locked me in a room. Well, we had racks that went all the way up to the ceiling. It was acoustic tiles. So right next to it was the bathroom, and there was plywood, and we used to keep other stock up there when we didn't have room, and we'd put stuff. Well, I climbed through the ceiling and went over through the bathroom, pushed one of the tiles out, and I fell straight through. Granted, I'm 13, 14 years old. He almost had a heart attack because, first of all, he was like, "God damn, look at this little fat kid falling through the ceiling." But the fact that I climbed up through the ceiling instead of begging him to get me out, you know, but that's the stuff, that was Carl. We used to do horrible things to him, like when he would go to the bathroom, we'd take his wheelchair, throw it into the middle of the parking lot, and he would crawl to it, because this is how we got back and he would sit there and curse us and call us dirty bastards. Like, "When I get y'all, I'll kill all y'all." And we would sit in the parking lot and watch him crawl to get his wheelchair. So, but I mean, it was that kind of back and forth. You know, I love the man to this day.
I'm in the parking lot. My mom drops me off. She's getting ready to go to the supermarket around the corner. And here comes Richard out the store with the wheelchair and just leaves it in the middle of the parking lot, gets in his car, and leaves. Well, whatever. So I go inside the store, completely empty. And Carl walks out the bathroom, and he's like, "Have you seen a wheelchair?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's out in the parking lot. Tell you what, I'll put you to work if you get me the wheelchair, and I'll give you free comics."
Started off on Kent, moved to Fairfield. I worked for Carl, Cap worked for Carl, Kirby worked for Carl, Richard worked for Carl. Find anybody around the age of 40 to 50 in this town, and I guarantee you, in some way, shape, or form, they worked for Carl at some point.
Community. I mean, Carl's shop was all about that. You know, people knew each other. You didn't just go in there to shop. You went in there to hang out. You knew you were going to be there for a few hours. You'd bring your sandwich or your eclair with you. I think it was a prerequisite in New Orleans to have a bakery next door to your comic shop. That was the other thing about getting your books. You definitely get a mint if he had an eclair around, because it was going to be covered in chocolate.
Or pizza.
Yeah. Or pizza.
Most of the people in the 90s and 80s that dealt with this were kind of socially retarded. This was our club. This was where we could talk what we loved and wouldn't get picked on, and it was okay. Even if you disagreed and you thought the person was an idiot, it was valid, because that's what they felt. And that's, comic shops even nowadays have that kind of feeling that it's okay for me to say what I want in this place, because it's family. And that's how I look at comic shops back then.
Just started buying Legion, started going. I lived on the West Bank, but I would come over to Metairie. Carl throws down the first 3 issues of Watchmen. He said, "Read this, Scott. This is good shit." And he was right.
I remember that I didn't want a class ring. They brought me into the office and wanted to know if I had some financial hardship of why I didn't want a class ring. And our stone was blue, but I just didn't want one. Knew I wasn't going to wear it and spend the money. But I came to BSI, and Carl sold me an X-Men class of 1991 class ring, and I wore that everywhere instead of my high school class ring.
I mean, he used to say all kinds of things that would get him into trouble. You know, it would be like a male customer would walk in with his girlfriend, and he'd go, "That's not the girl you brought in last week." And she'd be like, "What?" And as it turns out, one time he said that, it was the truth.
Mr. Carl got stuff from all over the place. Some stuff stolen, some stuff gifted. He just got crap all over the place. Well, he had a friend in California who got a hold of the Punisher movie before the movie came out. This was the Dolph Lundgren. This was the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie, which is great, by the way. And it was a screener copy, which meant it had the editing numbers at the bottom. It wasn't intended for public, distribution. Well, this friend of Carl's copied this 2-hour movie onto a 6-hour VHS tape. So Mr. Carl gets the movie in the mail, sees that it's The Punisher, puts it in the VHS machine on a Saturday afternoon. It's like 10, 11 in the afternoon.
He hyped it though for like 2 weeks.
Oh, he did? Okay, so he hyped it. So he plays the Punisher movie, and it's awesome. It's playing, anybody walking through the shop on a Saturday can buy their books and check out this cool Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie. Well, Etienne and I are in the back of the store, bagging and board and doing our thing, and Mr. Carl is running the register by himself in the wheelchair. And he's not even really paying attention. Like, he'll turn around when you come to the register with your books, but other than that, he's got to play Mahjong. So he's got his back to the register, and Mr. Carl only hears well in one ear, and it happens to be the ear facing away from the televisions. So Etienne and I are in the back, and The Punisher runs its course. 2-hour movie, done. And we pay no mind to it. And then all of a sudden, we hear very loudly over all the television screens, hardcore sex. Hardcore pornography sex. Just mid-go. We don't know what the hell's going on. Etienne gets up, runs to the front counter where Carl is, who again, he's playing Mahjong, can't hear this, and is not paying attention. Mothers with their children are in BSI buying comics and being privy to hardcore pornography. Etienne finally manages to get past Carl, who in a wheelchair is an obstacle, to hit stop and, stop the production. But not before a good few minutes of good hardcore action for the kids, for the kids.
I walked into Les and Kyle having a paperback book war. I mean, there was just paperbacks flying back and forth everywhere. Carl's throwing books at them, they're throwing books at Carl, and then they all stopped and immediately went to go service the customer. So it was about customer service, if nothing else.
I know everything about everybody in this place. You want to go far, you stick with me. But most of the stuff I have, Carl, is so foul. I don't want to put it out there. We're talking, other things, but being that it's going on print, the man was great. The second character I worked for was A.G. Parr. A.G. everybody was Carl's nephew. No matter who you were his nephew. I was his nephew. So if you worked for him, you were family. So A.G. was one of the ones that helped get Carl into comics by kind of like instilling. Well, he left and went to California to work for a distributor. It was Capital City, and then he worked for Diamond. Well, he moved back with a truck, like a trailer truck of comics. It was probably about it took us 3 days to unload the comics. So at Fairfield, there was a Pizza Hut that was right next door, and then there was like a dance studio. Well, that dance studio went out of business, and the owner was like, hey, of the strip mall was like, hey, y'all can use that for storage and all. So we unloaded that whole truck into that storage, and we would go through it and put stuff in Carl. Carl would buy stuff, and AG worked for him. Then he opened up a store on Maple Street called All American Comics. And I left Carl and went and worked with AG at that point, because it was kind of like I graduated from BSI, and now it's going on to someplace else. So it was kind of like a satellite store. Wasn't owned by Carl, but it was a BSI affiliate. That's how you felt. AG was another character. He was very gregarious, sharp wit. He actually gave me my nickname. My nickname in this industry was Spanky, and the thing about it was, he's like, I'm gonna get you a nickname. I'm gonna make it stick for life. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I went through 1,000 nicknames in a period of 2 months. And then one day he said Spanky, and it stuck. There's people in the comic industry, that's all they know me as, because that's how I was introduced to them. And it's weird when they hear my name Etienne, because they're like, oh no, that's Spanky. So it's, for me in life, what you call me is how I know you. So if you call me Spanky, it's very close. It's almost like family. It's kind of like my family call me Etty. But if you call me other names that I've gone through, depending on different jobs, then I know, okay, you're in this pocket of life. So that name is huge for me. I hated it when I was young. Hated it. Because I felt like, I didn't look like anything like Spanky from our gang. But, it was a way for him to jab, and a way for him to get me, motivated and go. But I think what I learned mainly from both of those two men is actually how to run a business or not run a business, depending on how you look at their model. And the other thing is how to be sharp, quick. So if somebody was trying to insult me, I was going to cut you quicker. I was going to cut you harder because they were that sharp. So I know I would try forever. I was trying to find AG's button. I would try to find Carl's button. And then when I found them and I saw the little hesitation, I put them in the back of my pocket and I'm like, I'll use that one for later. So, but I mean, it kind of molded how I am as a person and how I am, just in general.
He's probably got comics in his collection. He doesn't know that the pages got turned around. We used to take the staples out and take the pages out. We used to draw on the faces. We did all kinds of stuff to Spanky. Yeah, that poor kid. He's got no clue. And like that back wall, that mural that Claude Parrish painted, that was like an act of Congress to get that thing finished and done. And Carl was like, oh, just do whatever you want, babe. And of course, with this guy, he goes in there and paints a Superman and Mage at the time. Mage was huge. Carl's like, I wanted Iron Man and Captain America. You give me some guy with a lightning bolt on his chest. It's not even Shazam. Who the frick is this? You know, I'm like, that's Mage, man. He's like one of the biggest characters right now. He's like, I don't give a fuck who he is. He's not Buckethead. I want Buckethead. And I'm like, oh. Like, the guy's not going to repaint this shit, I mean, he's been working on it for 20 hours straight. But that's the way it was, Yeah, every day was an adventure. We got movie passes to go see Howard the Duck when it came out. And that was like the first comic book movie, that was like at the theater, got to go see it.
Big budget.
Yeah, big budget. We got to go see it 2 days early, we thought we were king shit.
So Carl got a bunch of these Mylar type balloons and had a tank, and he wanted to use the tank to fill up an inflatable Godzilla and insisted it would float above the store. It never happened. It didn't work. It's too heavy. So his friend Richard Ory came in one night and filled up the balloons, tied flyers to them, and as I was told, they were all let go at once. And so it was that if they had just let them go one at a time, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but it's that letting go of, I don't even know how many. I don't know if it was 20, 30, 50, I don't know. But letting them go all at once, they showed up on the radar over at Moisant, and Carl got in trouble with the FAA. But not his fault. And of course, when they confronted him with it, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Is this your flyer? Yes, but I didn't put them on any balloons. So he pled the fifth and pretty much got out of it.
The man was funny, but he had the wickedest sense of humor. He would constantly, like if you were sitting somewhere and you were bending over in a rack, he'd come and goose you, and it would scare the hell out of you.
I hadn't been to Carl's in a while, and I can't remember if it's because I moved away or if it was just that point in my life where I wasn't into comics as much anymore. And I went into the shop, and there's only two people in there aside from me. There's Carl, some other customer, and me. It's quiet. There's not even any music on, which was weird for Carl's. You couldn't really hear anything going on because everybody was being so quiet for some reason. I start looking through the racks, and I'm, moving stuff around for like I used to do for Carl all the time. This is out of place. Completely in my own little world. And all of a sudden I feel this little tickle on the bottom of my butt. And as I'm standing at the racks, the minute I feel it, I just whipped around. Thinking that it was the other customer in the store. It was Carl, which, he used to do that all the time, but it had been so long I'd completely forgotten about it. When I whipped around, I actually pushed his hair from one side to the other side. It was so close to taking off his head. But thank goodness he was already in that chair, because if he wasn't, he would have been after that.
It's always funny if I go out to BSI with my friends, walk in, and Carl's like, oh, yeah, I got one of Sheldon's way. You coming over here for a real job or something? And so whenever I'd go over there, Carl would be like 2 feet behind me in the wheelchair the whole time, just kind of giving me semi-good-natured shit.
I know that they used to have coffee. I want to say it was either Monday or Tuesday. Every Monday and Tuesday, they all got together and had coffee somewhere. And the heart of it was that Richard made these flyers up, and then AG went and took them out and took a staple gun and stapled them to every single telephone pole in front of their stores. Yeah, and that just that just pissed them off, man.
Well, honestly, it's hilarious because
when you look back on it, it seemed like it would be funny, but they didn't find it funny.
It really was funny, but they didn't find it funny for some reason.
Yeah.
I think that might have been Richard Ory, who went on to work on American Flag, that did that. Because he was always, like we'd be sitting there, Sheldon would be really, really aggravating, and he'd go off to lunch or something, and Richard would be sitting here doodling, and the next thing you know, you got this great full-page picture of Sheldon, and his head is exploding like the guy in Scanners and stuff like that. I do remember going to a con, I think it was Volcon or something, and evidently, and again, as with every convention, Sheldon doesn't want to get a table. And I don't know what he did. I think he got on the phone with Carl or something, and Carl was just in a rage when I got to Volcon, and he's like, now you're a decent little shithead. I don't mind you all that much. I mean, you hang around with Stibby and such. I put up with his shit, and he works for me, so that's all good. But your boss. Have you ever seen Carl go on a 2-hour diatribe? Oh, man. I mean, he was one of the few people I know who dropped more F-bombs than my dad did. And he'd just sit there in his chair, and, it's like, and here's the finger. And that son of a bitch shouldn't be allowed to operate a business anywhere in Louisiana. And he'd go off, good 2 hours. I'm just sitting here like, he gets in, but you're all right. Just don't leave any of those fucking flyers and business cards and shit on my table.
Kind of like a folk hero, folklore, why did this guy do it?
Parts of your letter I found amusing. To think, anybody was actually wondering about me as an urban legend, as you said. The other part was about my dad wheeling and dealing in 1982, when he actually had cancer in that year. Didn't leave the house very often. In fact, my sister told me she got her husband to disable his car because she was afraid for him to drive. Sadly, he passed away in 1983. I do not have a problem with the name you chose, nor doing an interview, as you can see. Though I have no idea what I could say after 50 years. My memory is sketchy at best of those actual comic books. Though I remember the Avengers was about Marvel superheroes joining forces to fight threats to our planet, or something like that. Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, Ant-Man. Everyone except Spider-Man was part of that group. I like the name so much that I got my team members to name our bowling team the Avengers in the 60s. Well, we did win a league championship one year. Not that it mattered at the time, but one of the reasons Alfred Medley Jr. wasn't on the stamp is because I had reached the maximum number of letters that allowed when I bought it. It really wouldn't fit. And I had a whole lot of these Marvel first editions, like Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, the Avengers, as well as a lot of DC superhero comics. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, etc. I always felt that they would one day be worth a fortune when I bought them. That was one of my main reasons for buying them. Thinking, little did I know how much they really would be worth today. So I called my father back and told him how much he should collect from the guy, and that I would be home in a few weeks later because I was actually going from New Orleans to California. I was living out of town. My father was the only person that whoever that collector was met. We both had the same name, Senior and Junior. I guess over the years they thought it was my father's collection, but I never saw him read a comic book in my whole life.
I mean, if there's any Alfred Medley books across this country, probably between me, you, Les, and Kirby, we started doing, we did shows, we'd go out to Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and we'd have those books in our collections because, I mean, we constantly traded them with each other. And the medleys were like mixed in with all of our stuff, so they went with each other. And then when we started doing shows, they went with us up there. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of the first medleys that went out of Louisiana came through us. Well, I mean, I knew it wasn't a store because I lived in New Orleans.
Right.
So I would have heard of Alfred Medley. There were only 3 dealers when I started collecting comics down here, and that was pretty much it. So I knew it wasn't Alfred. Now, it could have been like an old 60s store, but no way.
Because he didn't have a stamp. He didn't have a stamp. That's the main reason, but just to let you know, I've heard of vegetable medleys, sprint medley relays, and a medley of songs. But never a store named Alfred Medley. I can tell you that I purchased a lot of them from a newsstand that used to be in the 100 block of Royal Street, between Canal and Bienville. That I bought them on the way home while waiting for the bus that used to stop right in that block. And I saw the little Marvel logo on it. I said, well, this is new. I said, wow, I bet you in years to come, this will be worth a lot of money. But I said, oh, God, I don't know how many years. You know, I said, well, I'll just buy them and keep them. So I would come home from school, catch the magazine bus. They walk all over the Royal Street to catch the Desire bus, Franklin bus. They both passed on Royal Street, Royal and Canal. And in between, on Royal Street, in between Canal and Bienville, I think it was a Crystal on the corner, a Crystal hamburger or something. And next to it was this little opening, which was actually a magazine shop. They sold all the latest magazines. They had the Playboys with the little covers on them, hiding them. But they also had comic books. And every month, you know, you would get a new issue. So I would look through them and everything. And at that time, they cost 10 cents when I first started buying them. But then them jokers raised the price to 12. And I'm like, oh, gee, do I still want to buy? But some of the more interesting characters started coming up. I saw Spider-Man, which was in a book called Amazing Fantasies. I ride the magazine bus home. And I live downtown in the 7th Ward. So I'd have to transfer to the Desire, Franklin. They all passed on that street, but then I would catch the bus right next to this comic book store. That's where the bus stop was, in the same block. While I'm sitting there waiting for the bus, I would always go in the store. It's a magazine shop. They sold everything, and browse. And every month with comics, they had new editions. So I would go in there, look around, and see if I liked something or they had something new and buy. I'd buy 5 or 6 of them at a time. Man, that cost me less than $1, you know, back in those days. And pretty soon, I had stacks and stacks of comic books. I mean, because I would go in there, I probably went in there 2 or 3 times a week, just stopping at the bus. Or I look and see, oh, well, they don't have nothing new right now. But the next week, they might have a whole new stack of the next month's edition. So I would buy some more, kept buying and buying them for several years, all through high school, actually. And as my sister told me, I had them before I went to high school, but I didn't get them from there. Sometimes I got them at drugstores like Walgreens, or I don't know if you're old enough to remember K&B, Cats and Best Off. They used to sell them sometimes, and I would buy them from wherever. But once I got to high school, I really didn't intend to buy a whole lot of them, but then when Marvel hit the stand and I saw all these new characters, my mind started clicking, and I thought to myself, man, one day these are going to be worth some money. And I used to tell my buddy Stan that, who used to ride home with me, and he was like, oh yeah, okay. But we rode the bus together almost every day, because he lived further down, but we got to catch the same bus. We both went to the same grammar school. So we were friends before we ever got to high school. But anyway, when we did that, after a while, you start accumulating. And that was what made it interesting. They actually had a story connected to them, in addition to just the regular ones you had been writing. And you can relate to them. I mean, I think originally Peter Parker was a high school student, just like me at the time, Girl problems, which all of us could relate to at that age, Rejection. He was, and another thing, he was actually, his job was to be a photographer. Now, how he got the shots, the boss didn't really know, because he was Spider-Man. He was always on the scene when it happened, and he produced some good pictures of Spider-Man. I wish I had his equipment. And that was another thing. I was always interested in photography. So here's a guy that's a photographer. He's in high school, got a job. I could relate to him, except I couldn't climb walls. I had two reasons for stamping my books. One was because I wanted to distinguish my books from my brother's books, or they may have gotten mixed up as siblings and created some altercations or debates, which is a good word for fight. The other reason was that we had a couple of burglaries at the home, and some of the items they took were part of my comic book collection. Yeah, and she probably knew that might have been a real reason, He used to, when he was younger than I was, he would take my socks and wear some of my clothes or whatever, but, he was younger than me, so everything didn't fit him at the time, but socks did, and comic books, he kind of got them all mixed up. Yeah, you ask my sister and brother if they think I'm a living legend, they probably think I'm more a POA. Well, some of my friends and some of my family, they read comic books when they came over to the house. They would always be in my collection. So I said, and I wasn't sure if some of them would come missing, especially with a younger brother. He bought a few comics. He didn't buy that many. But somehow some of mine would become some of his. So I went on a mail order or something. I saw this advertisement for a stamp. It had so many letters in it. And so I said, okay, I know what I'll do. I'll buy me one of these little stamps. And when I bought them, I started stamping the comic books. I said, well, at least this will separate mine from his or anyone else's. Well, every time I bought them, I go home before I'd even read them. I'd stamp them. Usually in the middle of the book or either the lightest part of the cover so you could see it. I mean, with colorful characters and comic books, some parts are darker than others and you can't see the stamp. So I always tried to make sure it was in an area where you could actually see the stamp. And a couple of times, my parents had a burglar or two at their house, and I'm like, the way they knew they would be burglarized is because I realized, I told my mother, I said, some of my comic books are missing, and I'm not sure what happened to them. And then when she looked around the house, she found other items missing. And I said, oh, wow. Well, you call the police, tell them if they find these guys and they got comic books with my name stamped on them, that's ironclad proof that they're the ones who took all the other items, you know. She said she was missing some jewelry and some other things, you know, which, I mean, it was just penny ante stuff, so you know it was teenagers or something that did it. I had this half-inch rubber stamp, so I marked them all with the stamp. In hindsight, if I had thought about it, I would have stamped the back of the comic book instead of the front cover. But that was over 50 years ago. When I would come back to New Orleans, every now and then I would hear someone who had purchased a copy with my name on it. Funny part is, I don't remember who I sold them to, because I never met the guy. I talked to him on the phone one time. More than likely, he was the guy with the comic book store, like in the Big Bang Theory TV show. Nor do I remember how many times some of them had been recirculated. No. Too bad I didn't own them now. I might have Stan Lee type money because of all the superhero movies that they have made. I'm sure they have generated millions of dollars. I know they're worth a lot more than the price of that plane ticket to California that I let them go for. It was nearly impossible, though, to justify hauling all those comic books to another state. My parents wanted to get rid of them because I left them, they considered them clutter. I did have fun in California.
What were you doing in California?
Well, I had cousins out there. They took me to the beaches. They took me all over. It was my first, well, maybe my second time going to California. It was bright and sunny. It was the summer, I think. And I got to see them. Met some nice people out there. Young ladies out there were very aggressive. You'd be standing on the beach and some of them would come up and start talking to you. And I'm like, wow, this is not like back in the South. And, you know, so it was fun out there, you know. For 2 cents, I probably could have stayed. But
I would come in every Sunday and fix his computers because Carl bought really bad equipment. And not only did he buy bad equipment, but he constantly screwed it up because he thought he was trying to make it go faster or whatever it was he was trying to do. So I'd pick him up on Sundays. We'd go get some coffee. We'd go get some food and come here, and I would just fix his stuff. And I'd browse the rack. And at the time, I was out of comics. I'm one of those people that was kind of in and out of comics, you know, as you grow up. You know, just discover girls or whatever, and you get out of comics. And then you dump the girls and you get back into comics. And so that's kind of where I was. And so Carl would just give me comics for fixing his computers. And so we were just friends for the longest time. And after Katrina hit, Carl calls me and he says, you know, I don't know, he was asking for something computer related, if I had a copy of something. I said, no, I don't have that, but, you know, what's going on with the shop? And he says, well, the shop, you know, took on damage and I'm getting out. And I said, what do you mean you're getting out? He goes, well, the AC unit was torn off the roof and water poured in, and so, you know, it's just too much for me to do. I'm getting too old for this, so I'm out. I've already put in an insurance claim, and we're closing the doors. And I said, well, why don't I come pick you up tomorrow, and let's go. I want to see how bad it is, you know. So I came in, and I saw how bad it was, and there was water and mildew everywhere on the upstairs, and, you know, books that were here had been sitting here for months, you know, with water in the shop, so all the covers were warped, you know, from the humidity and stuff. And so I said, you know, what do you think if I might buy the store? You know, and he says, well, you know, you can buy the name from me, but I don't own any of the product. I already put in my claim. I said, all right. So I got the wife to run the numbers, and it looked like it was going to be feasible for us to not only buy it, but to be able to make it work. And so one thing led to another, and I bought all of the remaining stock from the insurance company and just started running the store.
And working for Sheldon was like being in an episode of Monty Python half the time. I mean, you never know what absurdity was going to go on. Or if he were still alive, I would probably drop him a postcard just for shits and grins. Hey, man, what the hell have you been doing for the past 35 years?
He'd probably still be alive. And if Alfred Medley's alive, I want to know who he is. If he's dead, I want to know who he was.
I would appreciate it if you would send me a Xerox copy of that Avengers comic book cover with my name stamp on it. You have revived old memories that I had really forgotten about. I kind of wonder what happened to the other 899 comics, if any of them still exist. Thanks, Alfred Medley, Jr. Who the hell is Alfred Medley? I think I know that guy, though. Who the hell is Alfred Medley? Who the hell is Alfred Medley? I'm the hell Alfred Medley.